I'm going to share the story of how I became the maid of dishonor. Apparently, you can't tour wedding venues on Saturdays. Not true, by the way. I just stop her and I say, Anna, please, just spit it out. She came ready for battle to defend her point. Everybody I have told the story to at this very exact moment of the story all have turned to me and said, oh my gosh. Welcome to Wedding Wednesday, the podcast that's about to spill all the tea on what it's like to plan a wedding from the bride's perspective and all the details no one talks about. I'm creating the podcast I need to keep me sane and feeling less alone as I plan my own wedding. We're diving deep into the hilarious, messy, and sometimes crazy world of wedding planning and wedding horror stories. Get ready to laugh, cry, and maybe feel a little less alone in this wedding planning madness. Hello, welcome to Wedding Wednesday. It's our very first episode. I'm a little bit nervous, but really excited to share with you guys all the intricacies of what it's like planning a wedding from the bride's perspectives and all the crazy stories that I've been hearing across the internet, my friends, my family, myself. In episode 1, so today's episode, we're going to talk about firstly, why I started this podcast, why I need a place to keep me sane. And then secondly, I'm going to share the story of how I became the maid of dishonor last year at one of my best friend's weddings. It's a crazy story. I've told this story to pretty much everybody in my life, and everyone was pretty surprised by the outcome of this story. So with that, let's dive in to why I wanted to start a wedding-related podcast. All right, so to start, I got engaged and, you're such on a high of getting engaged when it happens. Everyone's so happy for you. You're feeling like you're on cloud 9 until something happens in your life where you realize, okay, planning a wedding is really a lot. I will definitely dive into what I mean by a lot, but I noticed that I had nobody to turn to. And so one of the reasons why I wanted to start this podcast was to find a community of brides. I don't have that many friends in my life getting married right now. I have friends who are already married, so they've already been through it. But when you're in the thick of wedding planning and trying to figure out your emotions and all this, managing everybody else's emotions and all this too, it's just nice to have somebody to talk to. And so this podcast for me was it will now become this place where I can interact with a bunch of beautiful brides, chit chat about what it's like planning a wedding, and kind of relate to somebody outside of my own personal circle. The second reason why I wanted to start a podcast was really because the emotional roller coaster of wedding planning and the intricacies that come with it is pretty unmatched. Nobody warns you about this. You don't really understand what it's like to plan a wedding or what people say, what people mean when they say it's difficult until you're in it. And you realize that the reason it's so difficult is because all of a sudden you have become not only a bride, but a bit of a therapist, a psychologist, somebody who is managing everybody else's emotions as you're planning your own wedding and getting married and try to navigate your own. So it's really nice to share a bit about those emotions and maybe find other people in this community that also are going through the same emotions. Another reason why I wanted to start this podcast was because I definitely came to a bit of a sad realization. I don't know if all brides go through this, but I came to the sad realization that my wedding is really not about me. It really isn't me and my fiance. It's obviously to an extent about us because we are getting married, but it becomes so much bigger than just you. It's not at all like when you decide to plan your birthday and you really do make it all about you. You choose what you want as decorations, you choose what cake you want, you choose all the fun things yourself. When it comes to a wedding, everybody feels like it's their wedding. Your family, your immediate family starts to feel like it's their wedding too. So you come to this realization that you have to accommodate other people within this process if you don't want to really upset too many people. Of course, there are ways to still get what you want and stay firm within what you want while you plan, and talk to your family members about what you're really looking for at the end of the day. But still, those emotions come up and the wedding no longer just becomes about you and your fiance. It becomes about everybody. It's a bit, I don't know why, for me, it was a bit sad for me to come to that realization. I think it's because, you know, it's a day you dream about for so long, especially if you're in a long-term relationship, and to come to that conclusion that like, actually, like, his family has traditions that they want to upkeep. My family has traditions that they want to upkeep that I was never really aware of. And all of a sudden you're finding yourself trying to incorporate all these things. Makes you feel like it's no longer about you, but it's okay. And so this is one of the reasons why we're starting this podcast, to talk to other people about these things. Once I came to all these realizations and these emotions, I started going online to find a podcast like this. And yes, there are a lot of brides on social media who will talk about their perspective, who will, you know, share the intricacies of what it's like for them to plan a wedding. But I couldn't find an actual podcast where I could literally go to once a week to let off some steam, feel like I can relate to somebody, laugh off a little bit, some of the stress, listen to other people's crazy stories and horror stories when it comes to planning their wedding. I just couldn't find a podcast like this. And so I thought it was a great opportunity for me to start one because I am so early in my wedding planning process. Lastly, the last reason why I decided to start this podcast was because I ended up floating this idea by quite a few brides to see whether or not they'd be interested in also hearing about these sorts of things, you know, the horror stories and the emotions and all the things, and just having a place online that they could go to once a week, like I said, to let off some steam and laugh a little bit. And the response was overwhelmingly yes. And so this is why we're here today. We're starting this podcast today. Let's create a beautiful community together, and let's just have a conversation and talk about all things wedding planning and what comes with that. All right, what can you expect from Wedding Wednesday? Well, weekly episodes, 30 minutes about, where we're going to explore a variety of wedding-related topics. Sometimes we'll have guests on the show where they can share their personal wedding planning experience. Sometimes I'm going to be sharing the coolest Pinterest finds that I find on Pinterest, just browsing, like design-wise, like really cool things. We're going to share a bunch of Reddit horror stories that I've been reading, as well as any horror stories that you ladies, you brides, want to share with us that we can read here on the podcast. And then, of course, I'm also going to give you a wedding planning update from my personal perspective. I don't have a wedding planner. So far, I don't have a day of coordinator. I'm literally just doing this by myself for now anyway. And so I'm going to be sharing what I'm doing throughout this process to see whether or not it helps you like plan your wedding as well, and give you some guidance as to what you can do. I am pretty type A. I like being organized. And so this sort of thing does come pretty naturally to me, which is why I'm going to attempt at planning my wedding myself. And so, like I said, I'll be sharing my experience with that alongside you ladies and you brides. And then I'll be sprinkling in some other things throughout the podcast, you know, any Q&As that you have, you know, questions, any other segments that you ladies you'd be interested in also exploring. Happy to add those to our podcast too. And yeah, if there's anything that you would like us to share on here, please let us know in the comments or send us an email at hello@weddingwednesdaypod.com, and we'd love to hear your feedback on that. Let's dive into my maid of dishonor horror story. This really was horrific for me because, to set the stage a little bit, I have been really good friends with this girl, let's call her Claire, for about 23 years up until 2023, give or take. When we met in elementary school, we literally grew up together. We've been friends for so long. And so it was quite traumatic to go through this whole experience, but I will dive into it detail by detail. So set the stage. I've been friends with this girl, let's call her Claire, for about 23 years. And yeah, we've never had any issues. We've always been really good friends all through elementary school, high school, CEGEP, university, all the things. We had another friend. We were a trio as of high school. Let's call her Anna. So the three of us were really close for so many years. I'm 28 today, just to give you an idea of where we're sitting at with the timeline. Fast forward maybe 3-4 years ago, we incorporated 3 of Anna's friends within our friend group. So we went from a trio to a girl group of 6 girls. We were really tight. We had so much fun together. We did all the girly things that girls do, you know, go get your nails done, go for coffee, go to watch movies, whatever, all the things. Winter 2022, Claire gets engaged. We're all super happy for her. You know, we're celebrating her. We even, you know, attended her engagement party. It was such a fun, joyous time for us as a girl group to celebrate one of our friends getting engaged, and everybody was on a high. Fast forward to summer 2022, Anna has us over for a dinner party just for the 6 of us to catch up. Claire and I are chit-chatting. We're catching up. We hadn't seen each other in quite some time. And then all of a sudden she pulls out a box. The box was a maid of honor proposal. I was super touched, really happy to be her maid of honor. I was like ecstatic to be, you know, my oldest friend's maid of honor. It felt like such a monumental moment for both of us in our friendship, and that it was a really easy, natural next step, and it made perfect sense. So obviously I said yes. We had a cute little moment where I opened the box. I said yes. I said, I'm so excited. And naturally, my next question for her became, okay, well, when are you thinking of having your wedding? She says, I'm thinking of having my wedding end of July 2024 or early August 2024. I said, okay, great. But just so you know, my boyfriend at the time, so my boyfriend and I have been together up until this point for about 6 years. We had just moved in together. So we were a pretty serious relationship. I knew this relationship was headed towards marriage eventually. But in any case, to let you know, so I said to her, okay, great. Well, just to let you know, my boyfriend at the time, his best friend is getting married July 27th, 2024. They had already secured their date. They already told us that they were getting married that day. And obviously it's his best friend. And so we were definitely, you know, going to go, and he was definitely going to do everything not to miss that wedding. So I let her know. I said, look, worst comes to worst, if you really can't find another day and you end up choosing that day, I will go to your wedding and he will go to his, but I would really appreciate if you could just keep that in mind, seeing as, you know, I'm your maid of honor. She said, sure, no worries. Don't even worry about it. Why don't you come wedding venue shopping with me next Saturday so that, you know, we can look at venues together. Her fiance was unavailable that day, and so she had asked me to go with her. I said, great. A few days go by and I get a text from her and she goes, listen, apparently you can't tour wedding venues on Saturdays. Not true, by the way, because I've just been through it. I know for a fact you can tour them on Saturdays. I'm going Sunday with my fiance, and then I'll let you know from there. I was like, okay, sure. Let me know from there. That works. Sunday rolls around, and I'm obviously eager to know what day she's going to choose because I'm really stressed out about potentially missing Antoine's best friend's wedding. Like, I really wanted to be there. You know, they become our close friends. I become really close friends with this couple too. And so I would have been really sad if she had chosen that day. Lo and behold, that Sunday rolls around and I don't hear from her. Nothing, not a word, not a text, nothing. So I send her a message. I'm a type A, like, girly, I need to know, you know, I'm anxious about this all day. So I need to know. I send her a message. I tell her, hey, how did the wedding venue shopping go? Did you guys decide on a date? Things like that. She replies back. She goes, yes, we decided. I'm like, great. She's giving me one-word answers over here. I need like full-on context. I'm like, okay, great. Well, give me a bit more. What day did you choose? She doesn't answer me for like an hour. And then I get the message, July 27th, 2024. And I'm sitting there reading it going like, surely she's going to follow up with something. Nothing. She just like left the message like that. No acknowledgement of the fact that I already had a wedding that day, even though I did say to her, really, if you're really stuck, I will obviously go to your wedding. That's all I would have wanted in that moment was just an acknowledgement. No need for an apology, nothing like that. It is her wedding at the end of the day. But it would have been nice to have gotten an acknowledgement from the bride who asked me to be her maid of honor about the fact that, you know, it was going to create a little, not tension, but create a little snag, if you will, within my plans for that day and obviously my fiance's plans for that day. So in any case, I replied back and I said there really wasn't any other day that you could choose. And she said, no, it works out with my fiance's family's travel plans because they live abroad and they're going to come in town and it works out for them. I said, you know what? Okay, great. I'm not going to be that girl who makes drama at a wedding. I didn't want to be that girl. So I left it at that. So I'm not the girl who's going to make drama at a wedding. Love that for me. And so anyways, about a month goes by and I'm chit-chatting with Anna by text. And we're literally just like chatting, catching up a little bit. And she goes, listen, Ad, I have to call you. My friends call me Ad. They've always called me Ad. So she says, Ad, I have to call you. I have to tell you something that's been weighing on me. I have to tell you. I'm like, okay, weird, but okay. She calls me up and she's like beating around the bush. Like she's not getting to the point. And it's taken her like 5 minutes of like flailing around where she like doesn't know how to say it. And I just stop her and I say, Anna, please just spit it out. Like just spit out what you have to say. Like, let's just deal with it already. She goes, look, I was at coffee with Claire and she talked really badly about your boyfriend. And she basically said that she didn't want to invite him to her wedding and that she like didn't like him and doesn't want anything to do with him on her wedding day. And she's entitled to that because it's her wedding and what she says goes. So I'm sitting on the phone trying to take in this information. And I'm going like, oh my gosh, like, what am I going to do with this? Like, I don't know. Like, this is my friend of 23 years. She has never kind of expressed this really before, at least not to this extent, on top of the fact that she said it behind my back. You know, it's one thing to not like somebody, your friend's boyfriend. Everybody's allowed not to like somebody. But it's another to express it in such a distasteful way behind your back. So that was the part that I felt the most disrespected about, or that I didn't like in this whole process, that she just like, for lack of a better word, bitched about the fact that she didn't want him at her wedding and that like she wasn't even going to invite him. I felt like as there was a level of disrespect, there was a boundary that was crossed over here. So I told Anna, let me simmer with this. But do you know that she ended up like what day she chose for her wedding? Anna says no. And I said, she chose July 27, 2024, the day that I already had another wedding, his best friend's wedding. And we're both sitting on the phone going like, oh my gosh, did she choose this date so he purposely wouldn't come, but she wouldn't look bad because she could have invited him, but she would have known that he wouldn't have come? So we're simmering on this information. We don't know what we're doing. Our friend of so long has crossed a huge line, even though, you know, it's for her wedding. She feels as though she's allowed to do so. We don't know what to do with this information. For context, everybody I have told the story to at this very exact moment of the story all have turned to me and said, oh my gosh, how could she not like Antoine? Everybody likes Antoine. And that's true. My boyfriend's really personable, really easy, really fun. He makes you feel comfortable. And that goes with everybody. Him and I, we were friends before we ever dated. So that's always how I felt around him. And that's how most people do. So we were all dumbfounded by the fact that A, she didn't like him, but B, really the way it came out was just over the line, completely disrespectful. A few days go by, I'm like simmering with this information. I don't know what to do at this point. And Anna and I decide to call an emergency crisis meeting. We called it emergency crisis meeting. We meet with the other 5 girls in the group. We're all getting together at one of the girls' houses to discuss what are we going to do about this. I was really torn. On one hand, a lot of people would have said, just step down as maid of honor. How could she disrespect you and your boyfriend like that? On the other, I also felt a certain loyalty to my friend after all of these years. So I didn't quite know what to do. So I sat with the girls and they all, one at a time, shared their thoughts, their reasoning very calmly and very nicely and said, look, the only person at the end of the day who can decide what to do is you. However, most of them all said, at the end of the day, she really crossed the line. I think you should politely step down. You don't have to not go to her wedding, but I do think you should politely step down. The conclusion of that emergency crisis meeting was I need to keep simmering on what I want to do. So I go home, I'm simmering on what I want to do, and then I decide to reach out to Claire and tell her basically that I knew. Now, to backtrack a little bit, Anna did try and incite Claire to tell me herself. We didn't want it to get to, she said they didn't want it to get to this point where, Anna felt the need to tell me. She felt as though Claire should have said something to me from the get-go, and I agree. But Claire didn't fess up, so much so, her and Anna had a conversation about it, so much so that Claire decided to move the wedding day. Literally, she moved the wedding day to a week later. And just so she wouldn't have to sit with me to explain to me what was said and how she felt. Lo and behold, she really did move the wedding day. She ended up having her wedding a week after. But with all this animosity between us, I decided to reach out to her and say, look, I really don't want any animosity between us. We've been friends for so long. Let's just sit down and talk this through. So she said, okay. So we go to coffee and Claire decides to come guns a-blazing. She was pissed. Mind you, we're in a public place. Like, that's not an appropriate spot to be pissed or like to be fuming. She came like ready for battle to like defend her point on the fact that she didn't like my boyfriend. She sat down and she said, well, I'm allowed, like something along the lines of, I'm allowed to say that I don't like your boyfriend. I said, you're 100% allowed to say you don't like my boyfriend. However, you are not allowed to talk shit behind my back in that capacity. It's not okay. You should have told me, and you never should have said XYZ that was said. Before I told her what Anna had said that she had said, I wanted to hear it from her. I gave her the opportunity to tell me exactly what she said at that lunch with Anna. So she goes and she says, I said this, I said that, I said that, I said that. And I said, okay, 90% of the story matched up. The 10% that didn't match up was he was never invited. One girl said he was never invited. Claire said he was always invited, just not sitting at the honor table. Regardless, it's both not great. Now, Anna and I have also been friends for a long time. She's not a liar. The last thing she does is lie. She doesn't lie. She might have other faults. We all have faults, but lying is not one of them. So I knew that there was something fishy there. At the end of this lunch, at the end of this coffee, when she finally chilled and stopped coming guns a-blazing, she ended up apologizing. She moved the wedding. She actually did move the wedding day. And so I said to her, look, I'm happy to still be your maid of honor. But like, let's work on this. Like, we obviously broke trust here. We have to rebuild. As the weeks, the months moved on, itching closer and closer to the wedding day, I just couldn't shake this feeling that her and I were just not like what we used to. I had just bought a house with my boyfriend, and I felt like I couldn't share that with her anymore. She wouldn't be happy for me. And it's hard to be friends with somebody who doesn't like your life partner and, can't support you. So how do you build a friendship off of the fact that she doesn't support a huge part of your life? So it's very, very challenging. Lo and behold, Claire ended up upsetting one of the other girls in our friend group. And that girl sent her a message that really caused Claire to sit back and evaluate all her friendships. I woke up the next morning after that message was sent to Claire, to a message from Claire to myself, asking me straight up, hey, Ad, are we still friends? ? I sat with this message for hours. I did not know how to answer. How do you answer yes or no so easily? Friendships can be complicated, and she knew that her and I were in a complicated friendship. I don't know why she would have thought that conversation was enough to put everything under the rug and move on, the one that we had at the coffee shop, but I guess she did. So after a few hours of simmering on this, I replied back to her and I said, look, it's been really hard with everything that's happened between us, with everything that's happened between you and the other girls. I feel as though I can no longer share big life moments with you, and I don't know where that leaves us as friends. by saying that, I was hoping she would fight a little bit for our friendship, or she would say like, look, like I'll earn your trust, or I'm sorry, or I don't know. I thought she would fight for our friendship to some capacity, because I had been fighting for our friendship. I had been trying to get over all of this animosity between us. I decided to say her maid of honor. Like, I was fighting, so I was hoping she would do the same. After I sent her that message, she replied back saying, I totally get it. She literally said, I totally get it. I wish you nothing but an amazing life. You don't have to come to my wedding. And then proceeds to unfriend me on Facebook. So that is how I became the maid of dishonor. If you have any crazy horror stories like this, where this has happened to you, or you're the bride sharing the story, or you're the bridesmaid or the maid of honor sharing a story like this, or the mother of the bride, somebody, feel free to share it with us. We would love to get all of your submissions on the crazy horror stories at our email. It's hello@weddingwednesdaypod.com. We will happily share them on the pod as well. Of course, please take some time to rate, review, comment, share, like the podcast, because it really will help our podcast and we appreciate it. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them as well. And with that, I will see you in the next episode, where we're going to dive into other people's horror stories and plenty other wedding goodies. Bye for now.